And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Cristina Gomez, UFO researcher, podcaster, and journalist from UFOnews.co. And that is the one-stop shop for UFO news from around the world. Cristina, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And I want to first start with, how did you get interested in UFOs and the paranormal?
I've always been interested. I grew up with very strange parents that always spoke to me about these kinds of things, but on a very surface note, nothing too crazy. After I had entered university, I thought, you know what? I have so much free time. I want to learn more about UFOs. And now I have no free time whatsoever, even after graduating. But what I've learned is there's so much going on in the world that we simply do not understand that I think really needs to be covered. And a big reason to why I started my YouTube channel under Cristina Gomez was to talk to experts, talk to those in the field, and to really answer my questions that were leaving me so hungry. Like, do you know what the heck is going on? And it seems that with all the people that I speak to, we have so many speculations and so many ideas, but there's still this whole category of unknown. Like, we don't really know what's going on, but we have these ideas and these hypotheses. And then it got more interesting when the US government got involved, taking a serious note, looking into this with the AOI MSG, the UAPTF, and then that shifted over to Arrow. And then more congressmen started talking about it. And while there is this catch-22 with the government of how could you believe them? Have they ever told the truth? In some respects, I'm like, okay, I get that mentality. But on the other half is the United States government has the biggest audience. The whole world is watching. No one content creator, UFO researcher can reach the same amount of people as Congress. And the way that they've been talking about it the last few years of we want to have UFO hearings, we want to bring firsthand witnesses, we want the data and disclosure. People are looking at this and saying, okay, you know what? I shouldn't be so scared to talk about this. This is a real thing to talk about at the dinner table or on a show like this or in the forest with your friends, right? And I think that we are truly talking about the most important conversation that humanity is having right now. And I love researching the stuff, both the history from over the centuries to modern day and how the US politics is managing this and really global politics. We have seen Japan speak about this over the last few years, the UK, Canada, and a few other countries are kind of following suit with the US, talking about this, releasing their programs, releasing a few reports here and there. And I just can't be more excited for what the future holds on this topic.
Well, speaking of the dinner table, did you and your family ever have discussions about either one of you having your own experience?
Funny enough, no, it wasn't until last year that my parents told me their UFO sightings. They never had previously. And what I learned from my mom, who used to live in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, she had mentioned that her mother was drying clothes on the roof and she saw several UFOs hovering over the capital. She calls her children, my mother and my uncle, and saying, guys, you need to come up here. You need to see this. So the two kids are running up to the roof and they see several triangle shaped UFOs. The very next day on in the newspapers, it just stated, oh, it was a military exercise. And this took place in the 1980s. And my mother, my uncle, and my grandmother were like, nah, that was not military. It was too silent. Those things were perfectly triangular. We'd never seen anything like this prior. And it was over the capital, the most populated city in Venezuela altogether. And I'm like, Mom, actually like this, Ma, why'd you never tell me this? What? Oh. And she's like, Mi amor, you never asked. I'm like, darn it, mom. You're so right. I never asked if you had a UFO sighting. I wish I did. And then I asked my dad the same question. Just a little bit of context. My parents have been divorced for a very long time. I asked my dad, and I'm like, Dad, have you ever had a UFO sighting? And he says, it's funny you asked that. Actually, yes. And I said, why didn't you tell me this earlier? What happened? And for my father, he was visiting some friends in Houston, Texas, very close to where you are, Jeff.
Hmm.
And him, my mother, and a few other friends saw some UFOs in the sky. But this was like, I think late 90s, early 2000s, and they saw it and they never spoke of it again. And that's a reoccurring theme with a lot of people that have UFO sightings, especially during that time frame of we don't really have a safe space to talk about this. We don't know what it is. We're not knowledgeable. Therefore, we're never going to mention it again. And when I asked my father for further details, he thought to himself and said, I've never told this story since that moment that it happened. He had never shared it since. And I asked him, well, why not? And he says, well, one, I forgot. Two, it didn't seem relevant. And three, I didn't know who to talk to. Who would listen to me of seeing something so crazy? A UFO? How can you prove that? And all of those points were very valid. So when I asked my parents these things, they gave me their answers. And through my research, I have come to find out that in some ways, UFO sightings are generational. There are certain family lines where multiple people in a generation will have UFO sightings. And I thought, okay, have I had UFO sightings? Like going back into my memory, like has that happened to me? And I did have one. And very much like my father, the encounter came and left. Witnessed it, I was shocked, and then I forgot about it until someone prodded me and said, well, have you had a sighting? And I'm like, wait a second, no, yeah, I have. And in that case, I'll give you a brief description of that one. Even though it took place in what, 2017, 2018, I still haven't fully digested it. But what happened was I saw these craft in the sky that looked semi-organic, very similar to the Carlos Diaz lights. And there were just a few in the sky. One came very close, and the person next to me had mentioned, "These are our friends." Like everything is okay. But we were all shocked. None of us pulled out our phones, which is very disappointing. I have no pictures, which I'm very sad to say. And now I would be freaking out. I would attach cameras to myself when I walk outside. I'd be like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to witness everything and record it for the internet. That that would be awesome if that were true. But for my encounter, it was shocking. And then that memory was just buried very deep into my mind. And a lot of people from who I've spoken to and accounts that I have read, they experience the same thing. And that's a very strange phenomenon with this, where sometimes memories are manipulated, other times they are suppressed. We hear that prevalently in alien abductions and people that have sightings. It's strange. It really is.
Now, when you say that these were semi-organic craft, are you saying that they were basically orbs like Chris Bledsoe sees?
What I mean by semi-organic, and I think the connection that you made, Jeff, is a good one. These craft were you were still able to see an amorphous shape. They weren't completely round. But they also weren't nuts and bolts. The best way I can explain it is that they were just semi-organic looking.
It appears to me that mass sightings mostly occur in South America, like what happened in Venezuela. Would you agree with that? And if so, why do you think they happen there so often?
That's a really good question. There have been a lot of mass sightings globally, but South America does have some very compelling cases compared to other parts of the world. And one of those places is actually in Brazil. The most famous case that was like a huge mass sighting, and one of my favorite cases of all time, one of them is the Colares, Brazil incident that took place back in 1977. And that one was seen by the entire town of Colores and the surrounding towns as well, where for 6 months, UFOs were seen in the sky like at 7 or 8 p.m. every single night. But what was very unique about these sightings is that beams of light would shoot down from the craft and they would bathe these people, creating puncture wounds on them. It was so terrifying for these citizens that they dubbed these craft as chupa chupa because they believed that these craft were actually sucking blood from their bodies for an unknown purpose or reason. One thing to mention, though, is that this very small town was a heavily Catholic town. And so it was believed that it was even demonic in nature. But it got so intense, so extreme that people wouldn't walk out at night. Multiple families would live under one roof because they didn't want to be left alone. The mayor had to call the capital, Brasilia, to ask for military to come in and protect his people. So the citizens were expecting all types of weaponry. They were looking for tanks and guns and all these different things. But instead, they created, the capital of Brazil, created Operação Plato or Operation Saucer. And they brought telescopes, papers, and pencils in order to document the phenomenon. They collected over 4,000 witness testimonies. We actually have a lot of pictures and drawings that were conducted from Operação Plato years later in the early 2000s, which was released through FOIA. And you can now find that report on the Black Vault. And it just shows that this incredible mass sighting was a truly terrifying one. And one that we can actually compare this to is one that took place in Peru not too long ago, where the explanation for these strange beings being seen by these very small villages was, oh, it's just miners with jetpacks, which is a silly explanation. And these villagers from was like what, a year or two ago now, they tried to shoot at these beings that they were seeing floating in the sky, and their bullets would be repelled. They were not able to puncture these beings with their bullets. And there were interviews that they gave to the local media during that time frame stating how scared they were. One little girl in her teens almost had her throat slit by one of these beings. And I think it was very embarrassing for them to hear that the official explanation was jetpack miners, illegal jetpack miners. Miners as in like those that are mining in the ground and stuff, not like miners like children, right? And then that story came and left very quickly. One reoccurring theme that we see consistently is that we'll have these incredible UFO sightings and encounters, both mass sightings and ones with potential evidence. And they'll be in the news for a week, maybe a little bit more, and then they would die and you would never hear about them again. Something that's also very similar to that is the Roswell incident, the most famous case of all time. But what many people don't actually know is that that particular case was buried for over 30 years, excuse me. For over 30 years, no one knew about what happened in Roswell until Stanton Friedman in the 1970s said, something really strange happened back in 1947. Let me go there. Let me interview the people. Let me figure it out and see what really happened. And it was because of him, I have a picture of him right there at the bottom, that we know of this case today. One of the biggest cover-ups of all time. But if he didn't do the investigations, we wouldn't have known about it at all.
Have you been following the Buga sphere? And isn't that from Venezuela as well?
The Buga sphere is from Colombia, which is right next to Venezuela. And I have been following the case. And just to give people a little background, there was a conference held in Mexico City, June 20th. And what's remarkable about that particular, it was more of like, it's more like a conference. It wasn't really a hearing. It was a conference. It was a nice little briefing that was run by Jaime Maussan, who had created a team to do investigations on the Bugosphere. found in Buga, Colombia. And there you had Mexican, Colombian, and American investigators and researchers and congressmen involved in that conference, which I found really strange. And some popular names that you might be familiar with would be Congressman Eric Burleson, Daniel Sheehan, a lawyer, right? Just to name two. Stephen Greer is another. And then you had again some Latin American scientists doing investigations on the Bugosphere where they conducted frequency tests. They cut a little bit of the metal to run some tests on what the material was made out of. But anything attached to Jaime Maussan, people look with a lot of skepticism from the things that have happened in his past. And what I'm referring to are things that have been classified by the media as a hoax. I had the pleasure to speak with Jaime Maussan on several different occasions, both talking about his previous research from decades ago up until the Nazca bodies that are still being investigated today, and what I have come to realize, and something that we actually hear a lot with these types of researchers, is that somebody will do whatever it takes to discredit them. A really good example of this is Bob Lazar from Area 51, where he gave an interview with George Knapp and he said, okay, we're doing reverse engineering tests. This is Area 51. Crazy things are happening. Immediately after that interview that he gave to George Knapp, people tried to pull apart his credentials. He didn't go to this college. He went to this university. He didn't actually graduate. This was his professor and not this one. So that made a lot of people turn a blind eye to Bob Lazar. We have seen something very similar with David Grush as well, the UFO whistleblower in 2023, who said the most the best soundbite, non-human biologics and crash retrieval programs. He was very quickly pulled apart. And then you have Jaime Maussan as well, where people have mentioned, oh, the Nazca bodies are actually dolls that were confiscated in an airport, which I could add to that a little bit later. And so then anything attached to him for future projects must all be fake. But when I spoke to him, he had mentioned that he has everything to lose. He's been a journalist for 60 Minutes for decades in Mexico. And then he became his own independent journalist doing his own independent stuff. All the things that we're seeing are being funded by him and his team, all that research, all those investigations for the Bugosphere, for the Nazca bodies, and things prior. But the media is so good at spinning things up, really racking people's emotions that they're like, okay, no, no, whatever he's saying isn't the real deal without conducting further investigations. Now, I am not saying that you should believe everything that you see and hear on the media. You should do your own investigations. And the nice thing about what Jaime is doing is that he's making a lot of the data public. He is holding these briefings, he's holding these conferences for people to make up their own minds on if they want to believe the data or not. And that's probably one of the best things anybody can do in this field is just say, hey, there's the paperwork, there's the data, go have fun, go figure it out for yourself. And I think more people need to do that with their research.
As a Gen Z researcher, how do you approach UFO research differently than the old school like me? And what makes your content resonate with the younger audience?
The process of being able to research has significantly changed over the years, especially over the last like 3 or 4, where we have so much data right in front of us that we're able to use along with AI to comb through so much that you might miss casually looking through the first 3 tabs of Google, right? Not only do we get access to all of the articles, we can also get access to all of the books. We can get all the books summarized, all the PDFs, right, through AI. Like, pick out the best parts from this. Give me more data on this. And while not everything is accurate with AI, it points you in the right direction. 20, 30 years ago, you had to go to the library and you had to pray that an author wrote about one specific topic that you were looking into in that moment. Then you needed multiple sources in order to write your papers or to write further books. Then you had to speak to witnesses, but you actually had to either go to that location or do a phone call, but you can't see their face. Now we have Zoom, we have these virtual conferences to where you're able to gauge, okay, is this person telling the truth? Are they lying? Are they thinking? Like you can really see it, you can really feel it. And that's one thing that has significantly changed over the last few years is being able to get more, I would say almost more sufficient data, but simultaneously, there has been a lot more disinformation and misinformation on the internet. And you're like, okay, how do I know which one's which, right? And that's the part that I think all of us struggle with. So in my case, I come across as much information as I can, and I give it to the audience. I say, okay, you make up your own mind. Do you believe it or not? I'm just giving you everything that I found without cherry picking. And then now it's up to you. So that's probably the biggest difference that I've come across over the years of doing research on UFOs.
What is the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself during your journey in ufology?
I'm more determined than I thought I was. I grew up being told, "Ah, Christina, you're lazy. You're not very good at anything." Sad. But this topic I love so much. I've been so passionate about it over the years, both the history and things that are happening in modern times, that I'm willing to dedicate so much of my life, my current life, into investigating and researching this. And I never thought I would have a passion for something the way that I do for this. And I think it really pushes you on the edge of how many hours can I research? How many hours can I sacrifice of sleep to continue figuring out what's going on, solving the mystery? And turns out a lot more than I expected.
Have you had any challenges as a female voice in the UFO community? And if so, how did you navigate them?
Of course. I think male or female, we all have our challenges trying to find first our footing, find the platform, our platform, not like a social media platform, but like find our foundation. But because it is more male dominated, I remember when I first started, people kind of scoffed at me a lot. People brushed me off a lot, saying, "Oh, you're not professional. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything because you're a female and you're also really young as well." That was a hard pill to swallow at the time, but I think it really fed into that passion and determination. A little bit of like, I will prove you wrong, but simultaneously of I want to give other people that are having the same struggles to find a place with the work that I do, either with the articles that I write or the shows that I produce of like anyone can be involved in this topic. It's not just for one type of person. And the more voices that we have in this, there's always going to be one, at least one person that's going to resonate and be like, thank you so much for doing this. Now I want to do it. And that's probably one of my favorite things about this is getting those emails, getting those DMs of, hey, thank you for doing this. Now I wish to follow in your footsteps.
Since you're up in the Pacific Northwest, have you ever been to East Seti Ranch?
I have not. No,
Do you know where that is, or do you know?
I do. I do. And I know of the stories.
Hmm. Have you ever participated in a CE5 event?
I am a little hesitant with CE5 because for me, it's like a Ouija board. And I know people are going to disagree, and that's totally okay. But for myself, from my own research, my own personal experiences, CE5 is like a Ouija board. You don't really know what you're inviting in. And once you invite them, then what? Can you close it? So that's just one part that I'm like, I'm not comfortable with it yet. But if someone can prove me wrong and say it's 100% safe every single time with data to back it up, maybe I would try it.
There's a new group out there, and I think they're called Star Watchers. Have you heard of them?
Skywatchers,
Sky
yes.
Watchers, and they
Yes.
supposedly have some device that can make UFOs appear. Have you looked into that?
I have. Gary Nolan had made a mention of that. He has also done investigations with them that not all the time, but a significant amount where data can be collected. That they have this device that hits a certain frequency that's able to invite, I think it's the word I want to use, invite these craft. And I have so many questions. I have so many questions with that. With that and with CE5, one of my biggest questions is what gives us this level of hierarchy to invite these things of like, hey, I really want to see you. Come on down just for some fun and giggles, right? It's like, aren't they busy? Don't they have something else better to do than just show themselves as a party trick? Like, that's just something that I truly want an answer to. Is it because they want to be seen? They want to be spoken about? They want to have some form of catastrophic disclosure? Or is it just because I think it's funny and I think it's fun? I don't have an answer for that, but that's something for me that's always in the back of my mind of why are these craft doing this? Who are we? How important must we be to, first of all, think, oh, I'm going to do this and they're going to come. And second, for them to actually come when they do.
Have you followed the fire that happened in Area 51? And if so, can you update us on that?
I haven't. I haven't. I'm behind on that. So I don't have an answer. But I have something else for you, Jeff.
Okay.
Remember the LA fires not
Mm-hmm.
too long ago? What I think it was Fox News. They were filming the LA fires, and this very fast-moving craft goes across the screen. Nobody caught it in that moment until it hit the internet just a few hours later. People were saying, I saw this really strange, fast-moving object that wasn't a fly go across the screen. Now, people said, oh, it must have been a drone, it must have been a helicopter. But after a little bit of analysis, it didn't follow any of those characteristics. So I went ahead and I did some digging historically of other times UFOs have been seen during events of catastrophe. And the LA fires was definitely one of those. But we have heard of cases during catastrophic tsunamis in Japan with the explosion of the nuclear power plant in Japan as well. There were UFOs that were seen. And same with any type of volcanic activity in Hawaii or Iceland, UFOs have been seen as well. And anytime during war, there have been a lot of sightings during the Afghan War, during the Vietnam War, during the Roman War in like the year 600 and something. Then you have wars taking place in the sky in the 1200s over Germany, the Nuremberg incident. And that leads into a lot of questions that many UFO researchers have, which I like to call ufologists, of why are they paying attention to historical moments in history? Some ideas, very recent ideas actually, over the last few years, one of them being that they are time travelers, humans from the future that want to see history in the making. As one explanation that even congressmen have hypothesized as well, one of them being Eric Burleson and Tim Burchett. But what if these beings are us or extraterrestrial are seeing these moments happen as if they are just documenting the situation? There are also ideas that some of these craft that are being seen, some of these beings that are being seen collecting water samples. A really good example was a MUFON case that was collected, I'm going to say like 15, 20 years ago, where this couple were just minding their own business in a lake and they see this craft hover over this bed of water and they suck it up like a tornado almost and then fly off. The couple were terrified, but they ended up reporting it to MUFON just a few days after. And that's one thing that has been mentioned quite a few times by MUFON specifically. And it's believed that maybe these craft or these beings are just, they're just like figuring out what's going on in our waters, either looking at contamination, looking at the little critters that are in there, or something else entirely, bringing it back to their planet for their own purposes. The thing is that with our marine biologists, our people that humans, right, that research animals and plant life, we go out into the field and we observe from afar, collecting samples here and there. An example would be Jane Goodall, who was researching chimpanzees. For the longest time, she did not want to interact with them, but would look at them from afar, but still collect their fecal matter from time to time, any of their tools from time to time, their fur, and so on, until at some point she and they felt comfortable for her to actually infiltrate the chimpanzees clan. What if these beings are doing the same thing? It's a possibility, and it would only make sense since we have done stuff similar over the centuries.
You're talking about all these UFO sightings in history. And I guess we would both agree that UFOs have been visiting for a long time. Many people say that the ETs would not allow us to have a World War III nuclear exchange. But if they've been here for a long time, why did they allow it in World War II, in your opinion?
That's a good question. And one that I have contemplated for quite some time, especially with how things have been heating up over the last few months. Our nuclear weapons now are much more dangerous than what they were during World War II or during World War II and during the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those those bombs only hit a certain radius. Yes, they were detrimental, but the technology that we have today, one would destroy the entire planet, no problem.
Really?
So would these beings prevent a World War III? I hope so. I really do. But I don't have an answer to that. With the bombs that were dropped over Japan, again, they were small, but they could have also been a warning of, hey, sweetheart, if you play with fire, it's going to burn. And ever since then, no other bomb has been dropped on a population. Now, there's being tests done all the time in the waters in the middle of nowhere, but ever since that one bomb was dropped by the US, nothing has compared since because it was almost a warning shot. It was okay, if you do this, it's we're going to show the rest of the globe how dangerous it is. So I would like for there to be almost salvation for World War III. Like it will never happen, but I don't know. And yet there have been very similar incidents that have taken place in the Maelstrom Air Force Base in the 1960s, where a craft, according to Robert Salas, had disabled a dummy missile, a dummy one. Same with the Vandenberg Air Force Base just a few years after that, where Robert Jacobs was filming again a test missile test, a test missile test, and they Robert Jacobs captured a craft in the sky shooting laser beams at this dummy missile to deactivate it. And what's funny about that particular case, which wasn't mentioned until, oh my gosh, a little under 20 years later, Jacobs comes forward and tells his story. He stated that after that video was filmed, he's called into the office. His officer was Mr. Mansman and stated, we have two men in all black suits that want to speak with you. This video that you filmed, it's not a joke, right? That really is a UFO. And Robert Jacobs says, well, yeah, I didn't manipulate this film in any way. Why? What's going on? These CIA officials, how they were classified, according to Robert Jacobs, stated, you didn't see anything. I'm going to confiscate this film and we're never going to talk about this again. After those men leave, those CIA officials leave, Mansman comes up to Robert Jacobs and says, if they ever try to threaten you in any way for you coming forward or who knows what, you're going to tell them that what was going on in that video was laser technology. But funny enough, laser technology wasn't really a thing until years after that video was filmed. It was still in like labs being tested, but it wasn't ready to go out into the real world yet. So it's I it's always important to hear, especially what these military officials have said in the past, what they've encountered, both their UFO sightings and their UFO encounters, and how long they actually sat on those stories before they came forward. I mentioned Robert Salas with Malmstrom Air Force Base, Robert Jacobs with the Vandenberg Air Force Base. Another one is the Rendlesham Forest incident. All these people didn't talk about it until years later, in some cases, until after they retired, where they didn't have that much to lose or a job to get fired from.
What do you think about Ross Coulthart's claims about the Tic Tac being Lockheed Martin tech?
It really ruffled a lot of people's feathers. They were like, how could you say that? And others said, oh, I knew this all along. This is something that has been mentioned years prior by Stephen Greer. But for Ross to come out and say this on News Nation, yeah, everyone took whiff of it. They're like, what is going on? Is it possible? You would think at least in 2025, we should have tech like that. We really, really should. We made such incredible developments in the 60s and 70s, going to the moon, going out into space. I mean, doing incredible stuff. And then our tech just kind of went stagnant. Our AI went through the roof. I mean, that's doing incredible. But everything else in between, it's just not meeting up that same pace as the 60s and 70s. So for us to have technology, I hope we do in today's world. Otherwise, I'd be a little skeptical. But back in 2004, it would make more sense for it to possibly be extraterrestrial in nature. So for Ross to mention, oh, actually, no, it's Lockheed Martin because multiple sources told me so. You don't know those sources, which is definitely a downfall to that statement. It makes a lot of people scrunch their eyebrows and say, is it possible? There is a connection between Lockheed Martin and UFOs being seen recently with the New Jersey incident that took place during Thanksgiving weekend back in 2024. And the connection is this. Lockheed Martin there are several Lockheed Martin facilities that specialize in drone activities. One of them is in New Jersey, one of them is in California, and another is in Colorado. The New Jersey incident, which took place over several months, really made a lot of chaos in the media and in Congress as well. And it really mirrored the Roswell blueprint of confirm, deny, confuse, of it's something, it's not ours, it's not theirs, to wait, no, actually, the FAA confirmed it that it is ours, and then giving out so much data, vomiting so many different words that people get discouraged and they drop the investigation altogether, and then they focus on the next shiny thing. We saw that with Roswell. We saw that back in 2019 in Colorado, where they had the exact same incident happen, like in New Jersey, in Colorado years prior. But because it was like information overload, people just dropped it. They're like, I physically and mentally cannot handle this. Therefore, I'm going to look at something else. So there are these ideas that with Lockheed Martin in particular and the New Jersey incident, that some of them were Lockheed's, some of them were not. And one sheriff in New Jersey gave an interview to News Nation mentioning that one of his officers told the sheriff that about 15 objects came out of the water completely silent, shocking the officer that witnessed it, and obviously the sheriff that heard the story secondhand. Can our tech do that? Is our tech transmedia? In 2025, I hope so, but we don't have any paperwork that it is as of yet.
It appears that this pattern of confirm, confuse, and deny plays out over and over and over again. Do you think the phenomena is either being promoted or trying to be contained?
That's the confusion. I think it's a little bit of both. It seems like there is this battle happening behind the scenes of those wanting to push it forward and those wanting to scale it significantly back. We've heard this from Lua Elizondo, for instance. We've heard this from Tim Burchett and from Anna Paulina Luna, where there are those really trying to push this, getting this in the front lines. But there's a few hands in the background that are saying, shut this down, shut that down. And Eric Burlison gave a recent interview to Matt Laszlo from Ask a Poll, where he had stated that, and if you know, all of the UFO hearings have been postponed over the last since 2023. Something always comes up and they get brushed to the side, or something else is happening simultaneously with those hearings. But Eric Burlison had made a statement that they have an idea of who's been backtracking the UFO transparency movement, but they don't have a definitive name as of yet. But they would like, I hope they make that public so we can all internetly shame them. Boo, and throw like cabbage, right? Internet cabbage. But people are really trying to figure out what is going on. But I don't think UFO disclosure will ever come from the government. It will come from the people. But them just talking about it is a big step forward.
What about if UFO disclosure finally comes from the ETs themselves?
Catastrophic disclosure, that would be so cool. That'd be so cool. And yet, people would say it's Project Bluebeam. This is all fake. None of this is real. It's all a manipulation tactic. And one year that keeps popping up for this fake alien invasion, or maybe a real one, we don't know, is 2027. That is a year people have been kind of whispering behind the scenes, out in public as well. Jeremy Corbell had mentioned that in his recent TV show. And we've heard Stephen Greer also mention the year 2027. There have been other whispers from other people that have mentioned that as well, that something is going to happen in that year. Now, will it be genuine and honest and truthful, or will it be deceitful and mischievous? People are leaning towards the mischievous side, the Project Bluebeam side. And when it really happens, how will we be able to tell the difference with the technology that we have today, the AI, the CGI, the drones that we have today? How can we tell what's real and what's not?
Why do you think the UFO community is so fractured and there's so much infighting?
By design, it seems like. The only way to get this topic uninteresting is to make it as fractured as possible. But like in any field, you're always going to have extremists and you're always going to have little plants here and there to sow discord in certain ways. And you never really know who it is. You kind of you can speculate. You're like, I think it might be this person, but overall, you have no data to back it up. So this level of ruining the UFO community, it's by design, and yet it's always been like that. It's never been this cohesive, harmonious community. It's always been on the rails. And that's what you have to just kind of use your own discernment. You have to take a step back. You have to and say, okay, what do I believe? What do I think? What backs up these certain claims? Because once you get emotionally involved, you're done for. It's game over. It's going to be really hard to get out of that. But stepping back, looking at it from a skeptical mindset, not a debunking mindset, but a skeptical, always asking questions. I think that is the healthiest way forward, and maybe one of the only ways to get the UFO community to see each other as the same versus as an enemy.
What is your favorite UFO case?
Oh, I mentioned it, but I gotta think of another one. My favorite one is the Colares Brazil incident in 1977. But another one that I really, really enjoy is one. I gotta think. There's so many, and I want to think of a good one.
Well, how
Um,
about this? What do you think is the most credible?
the Phoenix Lights incident. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think that one is the most credible because it had thousands of witnesses. It took place back in 1997. There were a lot of camcorder footage as well. And that one, very much like Roswell, confirm, deny, confuse, right? That that particular incident, they had all these explanations for what people were seeing, but no one could agree, not even the military. They're like, "Oh, it's flares. Wait, no, it's a military test. Wait, no, no, it's actually this." And I'm like, "Dude, if you're gonna make up a lie, just agree on one. Like, don't keep changing it up." So the Phoenix Lights had, again, thousands of witnesses, multiple footage. And then you had the then governor, Fife Symington, talk out about it just the day after. He brings in one of his employees dressed up as an alien. He laughs it off because he was told to. And he's like, okay, nothing to see here. Years later, years pass by, and he finally shares how he really felt back in 97, that there was something true to it. Something really did happen, but he was told to brush it off, to make a big joke about it, to just use the comedy card. And it, first of all, it didn't work. Everyone hated him more. They were like, "Man, Fife, you really suck." And it ruined his political career, actually. And so then years later, he comes out. He talks about it honestly. And I think just the way that it was approached, the conclusions that were given, the witnesses that spoke out about it, the media coverage as well, talking to witnesses, and it being so modern, it might have to be one of the most credible encounters in UFO modern history.
In one of your recent videos, you talk about how Stephen Greer has dropped some major UFO bombshells. Can you fill us in on that?
Yes, of course. The things that he mentioned is that there are those in Congress, in the military, in the government that are trying to brush away this topic. One thing that we always knew, but they're even doing a campaign against Greer that he is a Russian spy, an Arab spy. And I just feel like using the term Russian spy is so Cold War. It's so outdated. It's so old to me. And I giggle just a little bit. But the things that he has mentioned over the last few years, but in the recent interview that he gave, is pertaining not only to even the Tic Tac about that being a Lockheed Martin, but the overall topic that in his eyes, the people are being played, that there's so much going behind the scenes that the public isn't aware of, and that maybe very soon it will come to light with more congressmen coming forward with these hearings that are supposed to take place, which the next hearing that we're meant to get was supposed to take place in May. And it was postponed to August, then to September. And now, according to Anna Paulina Luna, as of July 15th, that are going to happen when the witnesses are ready to testify, because all of them currently have the skiff flu, which they're just not ready. They don't want to be the only ones. They don't want to lose their pensions. They don't want to lose their jobs. And we're hitting this rough spot in this public conversation. By public, I mean military government conversation of all these movements that are trying to get the ball pushed forward. They keep being stopped time and time again. And these promises that we're hearing, we're just being let down over and over and over again. Is that by design so that you no longer have an interest in these hearings, in these briefings as well, which the difference between a hearing and a briefing is a hearing is under oath. A briefing is kind of more of a round table, people just chatting it up. And that's why hearings are obviously much more important than a briefing, which we got one not too long ago with the UAP fund. They did their briefing with Burleson and Eric Davis and Lou Elizondo. The biggest takeaway from that briefing that everyone took was Elizondo showing a picture that was very quickly debunked by the media, but no one actually grasped anything else that happened. And there was a lot of very interesting information, but because it was not under oath, it wasn't held at the same level of credibility as the July 2023 hearing with David Grush, David Fravor, and Ryan Graves, or even the other one that took place in November of last year with Lou Elizondo and Michael Schellenberger, Mike Gold, and Tim Gallaudet. I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to be speaking at this next hearing because Anna Paulina Luna is really pushing for getting firsthand witnesses to come forward and to talk about this publicly versus the ones that we got in the past that were all secondhand, minus David Fravor, secondhand witnesses. Is that they were given information and then they shared it to the public, such as David Grush, Brian Graves, Lou Elizondo, and so on.
I know this is not a UFO topic, but to me it's close. Have you followed the news about entities coming through CERN and the people having contact with them?
I've heard of it, and it's also something that has been spoken about since I want to say like 2012, 2010. I mean, it's old. It's old. And there's a lot of skepticism with CERN, especially within the community. They think that CERN has to do with actually opening up portals more so than figuring out the God particle, which is what they're trying to do, where they're able to get a particle move 99.9 times the speed of light. And then you have all of these year bursts, like several years, to where CERN is completely shut down and they're fixing it up. I mean, are they really just editing CERN? Are they doing other tests that only a few people can be sworn into? There's a lot of speculation with CERN for like a decade now. Something else that, if we're talking about portals, is in Skinwalker Ranch. I know that George Knapp had wrote a book not many years ago, actually, about scientists during the Bigelow era. This is in the 90s into the early 2000s before it was sold to Brandon Fugel in 2016, I believe, that scientists would see these portals open and beings going in and out of them, such as like things that look similar to Bigfoot. There were some stories of dinosaurs, same with Bradshaw Ranch right next to Sedona. And I think that there's always been this interest, there's always been these studies in portals, people trying to activate them, like in the TV show slash movie Stargate, right? Where you have the military figuring out and using stargates to their advantage. It seems that it's a reoccurring theme that we've seen in a lot of media, movies, and TV shows, but also in books, looking at CERN, looking at Skinwalker, looking at Bradshaw Ranch. There's something to it, and it would be interesting to see if we really do have access to being able to open up these portals, and if so, I'll be a guinea pig. I will go through it. I have no problem. I think it'd be so fun and dangerous, but you only live once.
Do you think Trump will be the disclosure president?
I did for a while. I thought as soon as Donald Trump was sworn in and he brought so many people around him that also showed an interest in UFOs, I thought maybe this will be it. Maybe this might be the disclosure president, where he had mentioned as soon as I become president, I will release UFO files within a day or two. That came and left months ago. And after he went into office, he brushed off the New Jersey incident as, oh, it's actually us. They're not the enemy. We don't, and that's it. that was another nail in the coffin. I thought, okay, well, that was a little strange. I want a little more data on that, and we got nothing. So I don't know, but the presidential term is still very young. It might change, or he might just be at the right place at the right time. He might not be the disclosure president, but something might take place in order for him to have his hand forced to talk about it, or he doesn't need to. The catastrophic disclosure will do the work for him.
Hmm.
I don't know. I was optimistic once and now not so much.
Well, he still will be in office in 2027. So
That's true.
maybe.
We'll see how that pans out.
Yeah. How do you interpret the Vatican's role in ufology?
There are a lot of theories with the Vatican, especially with their symbolism, with their art. One of them being the pine cone, right in the center of the Vatican, and the connection with it being connected to the Anunnaki and or the pineal gland as well, or the holder of knowledge. There's all these different ideas on what the pine cone means. But if we look at Diana Pasulka's research, who wrote Cosmic American, who has been to the Vatican, who has looked at the books that are in the Vatican library, has conducted her own research. She's mentioned, along with Dr. Gary Noland as well, Pasulka has mentioned that the Vatican does know of something. They know kind of what's going on. There has been a paper trail of the Vatican talking to the CIA about a UFO sighting, an encounter that took place in Italy, which I don't see why they need to be in communication at all, the Vatican with the CIA. I don't get why, but hey, who am I? I'm a nobody, so I wouldn't know. But there there's always a speculation that the Vatican knows a lot more than what they're leading on to. We also know that the Vatican Library is miles long under the Vatican. They only give out a few hundred passes a year, and you have to go through extensive screenings in order to get that pass to actually read the books and the scrolls. And you only get access to so much of that library. You don't get full access to the miles long library, only sections of it. And they've been collecting scrolls, books, and reports since their creation. So it would make sense that they would know a lot about UFOs. They're just not willing to share for maybe their own personal gain, for power, for knowledge, or thinking, you know what, maybe the people just aren't ready yet.
If I got a pass to the library, I don't even know where I would start with all the books.
Right? And then imagine all the languages that it's in.
Yeah. And I wonder if they just have artifacts down there as well.
One thing to mention, though, is that I think the Vatican Library is starting to scan their books and make some of them public in their public archives.
Hmm, that's
But
amazing.
that's going to be like centuries of work.
Well, if people want to find out more about what you're up to, should they go to your YouTube channel or website?
Both is a good option.
Well, we know that your website's called ufonews.co. What is your YouTube channel called?
It's under Cristina Gomez, and there is no H in Cristina.
All right. How often are you posting there?
Every day.
Every day. Is there
Every
new
day.
news in UFOs every single day?
It seems like there is. I do UFO news updates almost every single day, and then Mysteries with a History on Thursdays with Jimmy Church of Fade to Black Radio.
Besides your YouTube channel, what is the best place online for people to go and find new or current news about ufology?
I hate to plug myself, but definitely ufonews.co, because anytime UFO is mentioned in the news, my website is an aggregate website. So it'll show up there first. And then I also write articles as well for all the shows that I do. But that place for any UFO news that's taking place right here, right now, ufonews.co is the best site to go to. I made it exactly for that reason.
When you mean it's an aggregate for news, are you saying that your website itself is crawling along the web and finding articles, or are you physically
That
doing
is
it?
correct. No, the site does it on its own.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I can be sleeping and then the site is still collecting UFO articles on an international level.
So I guess you get up every morning and like, wow, let's see all the news of the day.
Have to,
That's
with a cup of
amazing.
coffee.
That's amazing.
You know, forget the newspaper. The website's where it's at these days.
Well, if people want to contact you, how should they do that?
They can send me an email at christina@ufonews.co.
All right. Well, before we wrap it up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Be safe, and remember, keep your eyes on the skies. Jeff, thank you so much for having me on the show. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you, Cristina, and the pleasure was all mine. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.